Okay, good afternoon everyone. This is our first stop on the tour of Exeter. What we're going to do over the subsequent videos is take you from here into the city centre, and we're going to stop at a number of points along the way and explain to you the significance of these different locations from the perspective of the tour, and that will help you sort of orientate yourself as you get into the city centre. We're standing here at the top of Thornton Hill. You'll have just behind you actually come from the university along the valley path, and there are several things that we need to actually think about here. The first is really the sort of situation of the university. You'll have been at the university for a few weeks now. You'll have had time to sort of orientate yourself around the campus. One of the things that's important to actually start to think about is reading the landscape, and that's really what this tour is actually about, is actually sort of not walking through an environment in a completely sort of passive way, just looking in front of you, but actually thinking about and engaging with your surroundings, and actually thinking quite critically about why things are the way they are. So the age of different buildings, how landscapes have actually changed through time. So as you're walking into the city centre, don't just walk through the landscape passively. Think about these things and think about how a landscape has actually evolved through time. Behind you at the university, there are several things that we can actually think about from that perspective. The first of these, as you can see the sort of camera panning round towards the valley path now, is the nature of the campus itself. If you think about the campus, it's obviously built on a hill. The actual sort of brook, Hoopen Valley, with the Tadeford Brook, the river that runs through the back of the business school and then down the Hoopen Valley, which you've just walked across. That actually represents a significant change in the topography of the region. If we think about that Hoopen Valley, on the road in, along Prince of Wales Road, as you come into the campus, you will see that that valley abruptly ends. And that valley abruptly ends because in the 1920s and 30s, the site, which is currently underneath the business school at the University of Exeter, was actually the municipal waste dump, the city rubbish dump. That was all infilled, and you wouldn't notice that now. You could passively walk past it. It represents a significant change in the topography. The one thing that you'll notice, having walked along the valley path, is that as you go in sort of to the city centre, you'll come across this more and more. You're actually transecting, you're actually walking across a series of valleys, a series of brooks, small rivers that actually flow into the River Exe, which is down there to the west. We'll come across these at future sites. The other main thing to actually think about is why the university is where it is. One of the things that you'll come across is that Exeter, and we've discussed this in the lectures, was bombed very heavily in May 1942. The original sort of university, before it was the University of Exeter, the University College of the South West, was actually based primarily in the city centre. And it was only really after the Second World War that the campus as you know it now started to develop in earnest. And you'll see that many of the buildings on campus are sort of 50s, 60s red brick buildings. There are very few buildings that are actually before that time. There's Washington Singer, which is the building that psychology is now housed in, and there's Reed Hall, and that was the original country estate that belonged to a family that were in the tea trade, the Thornton Wests. And so effectively the sort of beauty of the campus, the botanical gardens that you see around Reed Hall were all part of a sort of grand country estate, and much of that has been kept, very pleasant surroundings, and the university as you see it today built around that. If you look behind me here, you can see as the camera pans around, this is Thornton Hill. This is an area, very sort of opulent area of the city that was built up in the early part of the 20th century. And this is just sort of to give you an introduction to some of the architecture that you can see around the city. Absolutely fantastic, often sort of semi-detached or detached houses, very stylish houses for the sort of middle upper classes to actually live in. This is something that we want you to actually engage with. Think about the architecture, think about the age of buildings, and sort of actively engage with that landscape as you watch the subsequent videos and you walk through the city.